All right, I'm here with Jeff Mendelson. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, it's a pleasure.
It's a show about becoming a polymath and all the areas of interest in between. Just please say hello to the innovators in the audience.
Hi guys, my name is Jeff Mendelson. I run a couple of different companies. One of them is Effectivo.Social, where we do social media programming for business clients. And I also have a podcast called The One Big Tip.
Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. And so share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Something about myself that no one knows about me. Would you believe that I'm an introvert?
No.
And that's one of those things where it's like, no one sees me shaking 2 minutes before I hit record. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of my, what I hide under my cape every now and then. But yeah, I'm pretty much an introvert at heart.
So your superpower is being able to just kind of put on that persona of like, hey, I'm a host, I'm here, I'm ready to go, that kind of thing.
Ready to bring it, man.
Yeah. So before we delve into some of the topics, what got you into like this digital marketing space for like Effectivo.Social and your podcast, that kind of?
So I started out working in corporate, and I was always in sales engineer roles, sometimes customer service, programming type roles, and I was always really bored, but mostly because they never gave me enough work to fill up the day. So I don't smoke. I don't, you have to go into the office from 9 to 6, so I couldn't go home. I couldn't go hang out outside. So it was like, great, now what am I going to do? And I started just futzing around, taught myself how to build websites on their time. Mm-hmm. And then when people would walk by my desk, they would see that, oh my God, Jeff's busy, look at him, he's tearing it up. I was just building websites for real estate agents. And, when I realized that I could make more money doing that than going into a 9 to 5, and the fact that I was, in the space of like 2 years, I was let go of like 4 jobs. I was like, F this, yeah. I'm out of here. And I got fired for the last time about 11 years ago. So I'm now certified unemployable.
Nice. And I heard in another episode, your nickname is the Grimreaper.
The Grimreaper, right? Because every time someone would give me a, some kind of praise. There was one time I got Employee of the Month. 2 months later, I was out. Then another time I was like the most important employee of, I don't know, 2008. And like 4 months later, a company disappears. I'm like, come on, guys. It's like, no. Like, and it got to be that the last job, it was really funny because I walked into the HR's office and I was just like, listen, 2 things. I was a director then, in air quotes, but, I really didn't have like people under me or anything. I told them, look, 2 things. Don't pay me for anything, right? Because I don't think a director needs that Employee of the Month BS. Mm-hmm. And don't recognize my birthday, right? I just don't want to deal. I don't want people singing me happy birthday at the office. I don't care about it. That's it, right? And I was just so jaded at that point, and they probably just looked at me like, God, but it was true. I just couldn't handle it anymore. And by the time I got fired for the last time, I was like, that's it. I mean, it was a lot of stress. Mm-hmm. How am I going to keep up my Starbucks habit? How am I going to pay for diapers for my kids? How am I going to pay how am I going to pay the mortgage? All of that. But, I've been blessed.
I resonate with you in that. Like, I've only been like fired once in my life, but the act of like working for a company, regardless if it was good or not, and having that kind of pressure above you and just kind of making you jaded over time, you just don't feel as encouraged to promote that company or try to like work hard for them anymore.
It's really interesting in that when you think about how you're building other people's dreams. Like most people, like they work for, I don't know, a big company. Let's just take one, American Express. Right. It's a 50,000 person company worldwide, so you think to yourself like, oh, there's some kind of like corporate machine or something going. Really what you're doing is that you're building someone else's dream. You're serving at the pleasure of other people. Right. And that's true whether you're in a 5-person company, 100-person company, or a 10,000 person company. You're serving at their pleasure. And what happens is that you're going to put in a lot of time, depending on what level you're at and the type of work that you're doing. And it just comes down to, do I want to be doing this for them or do I want to be doing this for me? Mm-hmm. It's your choice.
Well, and there's certain people like you and I think that just really kind of have to do our own thing. Like we just it's almost, I don't want to get too floaty, but it's almost like the universe was pushing you out of that employment role just so you would motivate yourself
Definitely.
enough to like do this, that kind of thing.
I was waiting for signs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the signs just kept on saying, quit looking for jobs. And really what it came down, the practical application of that, right? Let's not get too philosophical. Come back down to earth for a minute. When I would try to make a presentation to my boss, or when I was looking for jobs, right? I would send out my resume 50 a week,
Mm-hmm.
right? I would personalize them. I mean, looking for a job is a full-time job in and of itself. And I would personalize them. I would do whatever. And I know that I would look at these job descriptions and I smoke every one of the bullet points on that job description and I could never get a call back, right?
Yeah.
But then, as I'm making a pitch for digital marketing, like for a client, I can usually close 7 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe they'll ask for a discount, whatever it is, fine, but at least I can close it.
Right.
And my big revelation, a good friend of mine told me about this. He's like, listen, Jeff, here's what's happening. When you're sending your resume to 50 different people, you're not talking to the decision makers. You're sending it to HR. You're sending it to some sorter. You're sending it to some algorithm. You're just sending it out there. You're not talking to anybody. When
Right.
you're making a pitch to someone who wants to purchase digital marketing services, you are speaking directly to the decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
And since you're speaking directly to the decision maker, it becomes a binary decision, yes or no. And that's where I've had more success. And, that for me just,
Yeah, blows your mind kind of way. And it's that directness that you're talking about that's really interesting. And just kind of segueing just a little bit, for anybody who's in that situation in life where they're trying to apply to a whole bunch of jobs, I definitely know what you mean, where you would solidly apply, Jeff, and try to get that job, and then they would just not call you back, things like that. There was this really cool.
it's very depressing.
I
It's
understand.
depressing.
I mean, I would scan through tens of thousands of jobs every week when I looked for jobs, let alone finding one I liked and applied to. And it's depressing, like you say, it's a full-time job. There's an app called Crash.co for anyone who's looking for a job. I mean, I'm always for people being entrepreneurial, but this Crash.co allows you to pitch the recruiters and people at the company, like, hey, I want to work for you. This is what I know how to do. And it's much more direct. Like, it's almost like being that pitch to a digital marketer directly kind of thing.
That's actually interesting. I'll check that out. You know what it is that it's getting in front of the decision makers. And
Yeah.
that's true. So that's true if you're looking for a job as well. I mean, listen, I'm not knocking it. There's a lot of comfort and, there are a lot of good things to say. I mean, I got my sea legs, working in corporate. I wasn't just born into being a great marketer, for example. I had a lot of practice at this, on someone else's dime.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is you just need to be able to get out there and speak to the decision makers. So when you use a tool like LinkedIn or Crash.co, if you're cutting through all that red tape and getting to the decision makers, then great. That's what you should be doing anyways. And that was sound advice 25 years ago. There's nothing new about that. You needed to be speaking with decision makers then. You need to be speaking with decision makers now.
Like the whole saying goes, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Exactly. Yeah, very much so.
So what kind of got you into the digital marketing space besides that kind of practice that you're working on? Like what drove you to do it emotionally and just kind of out of pure curiosity?
It was interesting because when I started out doing websites, the real reason why I started out doing websites is that I wanted to be a real estate agent, right? Because think back 11 years ago, we were just before the real estate bubble. Everybody was becoming a real estate agent, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, great. I got to do it. So what's the first thing you need? You need a website, right? So I go and I research all the different websites and I see they all suck. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a better one.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a better one, but it took me 4.5, 5 months to do it. Didn't sell a house, didn't sell a mortgage, didn't sell any of that, right? And then when I actually tried my hand at actually doing it, I could, it's like, the first thing I went through was to become a mortgage broker, right? I couldn't sell a refi to my brother, right? The most understanding person. I couldn't get it right. Until finally some guy just put his hand on my shoulder and said, hey, Jeff, maybe you should stick to the website stuff. Right. And that's really how it got started. So I started, just doing websites, and websites in and of themselves are, they're great tools, but they're like drive-by shootings in a way. You get a big check and then you move on. Right. Yeah. What happens though is, the website, what I started to realize was that the website was only the beginning part of the conversation. How are you gonna optimize it for search engines? How are you gonna, for example, if it's a website that has a lot of content or a lot of content that needs to be updated, who's going to provide that service? Right away, I started getting into the recurring aspects of taking a retainer for updating the websites, making sure that Joomla, WordPress, and everything is updated. I
Mm,
started out doing web hosting. At some point, I was hosting about 1,000 different domains,
yeah.
and then when I started realizing that most of them needed some kind of marketing support, that's when I started getting into, okay, what else can I give them? Writing blog posts, writing social media, doing paid ads for them. And that's where I really got like, okay, let's put all this together under one umbrella and
Yeah.
make it happen.
It took those steps by steps. It's almost like that change of, hey, I pivoted from this kind of endeavor to just kind of simplifying it and really focusing on that. And that probably was a rapid change to you. And how do you keep up with changes? How do you kind of keep yourself sane?
I don't think I've achieved that. It's
Yeah.
keeping myself sane. I mean, if you ask it like that, yeah, I'll give you an honest answer. Um, Keeping up with it. So first of all, a lot of the change is forced upon you,
Hmm.
right? So nothing stays stagnant. But then again, you know, you need to pick your battles, right? Do I need to know at this point every time Google makes a small change to their algorithm for search engine optimization? I'm pretty much past that, simply because I don't rely on SEO as the biggest tool for promoting my clients anymore.
Hmm.
For paid ads, for example, I need to know what new channels are out there, right? So when Facebook started allowing ads into their messenger platform, yeah, you better bone up on that pretty quick
Yeah.
and learn how to use that to be effective. But do I need to know like every little detail, like I would memorize for an SAT test, the 10 different types of campaigns I can do? Yeah, I can Google all that. It's all at my fingertips. I think what it is that just choosing my battles,
Yeah.
right? And also finding the right people to support me on it, right? So my paid ads team handles the minutia, right?
Hmm.
I just go in and talk about, on a bigger scale, this is what we can do for you as a company. Then once I get all the specifications down, then I hand it off to my team and it happens.
I love that. And I can't wait to have a team myself actually at some point because I love strategy. I love creating like unique strategies that would do really well, but I hate executing on them because it's just so much effort to go in and make that content, make the social posts, that kind of thing.
There's a tremendous amount of effort, but what I can tell you is, you think about team,
Hmm.
and team is also a fluid term. A team could be one.
Yeah.
It could be one other person who supports you, so that if you have a VA that can take 2 hours of your work out of the way so that you can focus on other things, that start with that. Just
Yeah.
start with that. And
Uh,
then when you need to, then you get to. You don't need a social media person or a paid ads guy. And, you don't need to build a team before you get started. I mean, it's vaporware, right? Just, sell it first, sweat it later, because there are so many different channels that you can go to hire someone literally on the spot in order to make it happen. So start with one.
I got so excited there because that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today too, is talking about the VA. And what is a VA for those who are unaware?
So a VA is just an acronym for virtual assistant.
Hmm.
It can be anything from the person who edits your own blogs to someone who writes the blogs for you, who writes your social media or just schedules it out ahead of time.
Hmm.
Any of these tasks, as long as you can figure out how to delegate it, how you can communicate your needs to someone else, there are nations of people who will be able to fulfill that need for you.
I definitely feel like I need to get one. How does someone get a full-time VA?
Um, First of all, don't get a full-time VA, get a part-time one.
Part-time one. Okay.
Right. I would start out with I would just start out by projects.
Mhm.
Right. Let's just use the Upwork example. Upwork is a platform where you can go and post a job and say, I need someone to do X, Y, and Z, how much, and then all these people are going to come out of the woodwork and give you prices and all that. And you'll start to see averages, and you'll start to see the different quality of people, based on how long they've been on the platform, or,
Mhm.
what countries they're coming from, whatever. what will happen is once someone has done good work for you, keep them.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Find a way to keep them.
Mhm.
Find a way to make more business for them. I'll give you an example. I have a guy that works for me in India, and he does really great work. Every time I send him something, the next morning it's done.
Wow.
But then I went through a period where I didn't have any more web dev work for him. But I didn't want to lose him because I still needed someone like, I don't know, CSS.
Yeah.
What'll take me, 45 minutes to figure out, it'll take him 10.
Yeah.
And it's money well spent. So I told him, look, I put him on a small retainer system. I just told him, I'm going to pay you X amount every 2 weeks. I want you to bill me this minimum amount, win, lose, or draw. Like even if I don't talk to you for a month, I still want to see an invoice from you. But I want you to be available.
Mhm.
That if something comes up, it's
Yeah.
been working like that for years, and it's great. It doesn't cost me that much, and it's been a great relationship.
Well, it's almost like an investment in that person too, because like I said, if you can find someone with quality, keep them because you don't know what you're going to get with the next person and that kind of thing.
Going through the next person, yeah, HR is a thing,
Mm,
and I would rather avoid it. But yeah, you're exactly right. If you can find them, find a way to keep them.
yeah. So, kind of going into the whole digital marketing space and how your particular project, Effectivo.Social, what started that?
So I started out doing, doing custom type projects, and the agency model that I was working on beforehand, let's just call it my legacy model,
Mhm.
was, there are no prices on the site. It's just, call up Jeff, and, we'll talk about what you need, and I'll figure out the hours and the effort and what it's worth and go from there. Effectivo.Social specifically, think of it more as a value-based platform where the prices are right there, right? So I think it's 4.95 a month. You get 30 days worth of social media on most of your channels, and that's it. That's the commitment. So it's spelled out for you exactly what you're getting. Now, most businesses need more than that,
Mhm.
right? So it's really the basis for the conversation as opposed to the final parts of the conversation.
Right.
Really what it was a way to, to play both sides, whether to be this full-on digital marketing agency that does custom projects all the time, and then have this storefront where people can go and just pull it off the shelf as needed.
Well, it seems like it's more direct too. I hate going on a certain service website and not be able to know the price or in the ballpark of the price too.
Exactly. So it gives people an idea of what's there,
Mhm.
and you can see, you can make the decision yourself whether you think it's worth it or not.
Wonderful. Why the top level domain dot social? Because of the social media?
Yeah, because of social media, I wanted to be different. The fact of the matter is that the dot coms are so
Or
saturated.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're not going to get a one word thing, and it fit for that particular one simply because
Mhm.
I used effectivo, effective in Spanish,
See.
as opposed, and it just rhymed. So that was really it. I wasn't trying to be cheeky or anything, but it turned out to be a good. It turned out that it rolled nicely off the tongue, like it worked. And frankly, alternative top level domains like .io,
Mhm.
.cl, .co, things like that, they're coming into their own now. But
Yeah.
that's also because you can't get a jeffmendelson.com domain anymore. It's
Mhm.
like most of those are already taken. So unless you're going to be really creative, you know that's
Yeah.
that's probably the next best way to go.
I love those alternative TLDs. It's one of those things where there's a lot of interesting ones out there. One of my first ones I bought was poly-innovator.tech. I still own it too. And the
Mhm.
current one is poly-innovator.space. And I really like how, first off, they're cheap. Like this newer ones, no one's using them yet, so they're super cheap to get like for multiple years. But yeah, I thought I'd ask because I was really curious about that.
It's good for email addresses. It's good for alternative domains for setting up, for pushing people to specialty type projects.
Mhm.
So they're there. Might as well use them.
So earlier you were mentioning how a lot of times you don't really use SEO as like your main push anymore. And I take it you use social most of the time too, but where do you see content marketing or inbound kind of fitting in?
It needs to be it needs to be executed in a controlled fashion, and you need to be doing everything these days. You
Hmm.
can't just build a website. You can't just do SEO. You can't just do paid ads. Also just can't do social or blogging.
Yeah.
Any one of those pillars, let's call them, on their own are for the sake of vanity. And like SEO, for example, you just don't control it,
Yeah.
right? You just you think you do, but you really don't. And that was and if something goes south with the website, for example, and you're not responsible for the website, well, now you're left holding the bag for, well, I did all this SEO work, but the damn website isn't working.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is really control the entire playing field, right? So
Mhm.
on the hosting bit, for example, I only host domains that I've worked on. I don't have an open web hosting platform. I, t-
Well,
I make sure to have control over everything else that that I do. If I'm going to work on an SEO project and I'm not hosting it,
uh-huh.
I'm just not going to take it because I don't have the control.
Right. And it's one of those things too where SEO is so finicky. Like Google has been changing it a lot over the past decade, as you know. And one thing, I have WordPress for my site, and I changed my SEO plugin a couple of times because I was experimenting which ones were better, especially for different use cases. And by doing that, it not resets my SEO, but definitely put me down the rankings because of it.
So what you need to be doing there is making sure that you own your playing field,
Hmm.
right? So when you put all of your trust in Facebook, right, for a Facebook group or a Facebook page, you're trusting that basically Facebook is letting you into their house. That's
Yeah.
really what happened. And at any time they can kick you out of it. Two people just need to report you for any reason,
Mhm.
and that's it. You're banned from the site. You're gone, and there's no one to talk to,
Yeah.
right? The same can happen. The same can happen on the Google side. Try to, it takes weeks to recover from a Google manual correction or whatever, whatever adverse thing happens to your site. So what you should be doing is trying to own your data, which means owning your email list, owning your, the people that you send text messages to.
Hmm.
You need to get people off of those platforms. I mean, those platforms are great as sales channels and
Yeah.
social channels, but your main focus should be to getting that information where you own it. Because if Facebook disappears tomorrow or
Yeah.
today, actually,
It's good, really.
eh, I, I mean, we've already seen a couple of times that when Facebook goes down, it makes national news,
Yeah.
right? So if you're depending on that, or even Zoom, we're recording this thing on Zoom now. Zoom has been
Oh,
really finicky, over the past month. Granted, so many other people are logging onto the platform, but still, you don't own it. You're using someone else's platform for $20 a month.
yeah.
So what you really need to think about is, how am I going to own my own traffic or my own intellectual property? And SEO on its own is not the way to do that.
Definitely. And I almost sense some Gary Vee vibes from what you're saying there, and how just like you don't own the platform that you're on. Like you have, if you're on YouTube and adpocalypse hits or the next adpocalypse clip hits, you could be screwed. You lose your audience. What if you get too many copyright strikes for good reasons and bad reasons? And your YouTube channel is shut down, and that was your main source of traffic. I worked for a company at one point who their main source of traffic was SEO. I told them like, hey, you should really kind of build up that social media a bit because they had nothing on there, and they were like, oh, people kept copying us, so we didn't want to do it. I don't want to call it any names either because they're really awesome people, but they just focus too much on SEO, and I feel like that's not going to be good for the long run. One thing you're kind of mentioning too earlier is that you want to be everywhere, and I agree with that too. That kind of omni-channel approach. What is your opinion on that? Again.
uh, be in the channels that work for you,
Okay.
right? I'm not a Snapchat guy except
Mhm.
when it comes to my kids. um, I'm not a video guy, so TikTok is not my medium. It's also not where and if I have clients that are visual and do require that kind of engagement, there are plenty of other people out there that'll do it. I know my limits. I
Mhm.
know my team's limits. So you really need to be looking for what works for you.
Right.
That's fine.
So do you have any strategies for omnichannel? You said like pick your platform wisely, like know what you like, what kind of engagement you like, but like is there any strategies you know?
I think the biggest strategy is, first of all, you need to know your client, right? You
Hmm.
need to know where they are. You need to know what they're reading. You need to understand them. The other big part of this is you are not your client,
Hmm.
right? Or you are not your customer. What that means is if you're trying to sell baby clothes to single moms, right? Even if you are a single mom with a little one at home, you're already in a different mindset than someone who's going to be buying that stuff. So you really need to put yourself in their shoes, not necessarily my own shoes, right?
Right.
It really comes down to figuring out what it is that the needs are
Mhm.
for for your market. Know them cold, like just as you're talking directly into the microphone or into the camera. It's like you're speaking directly to one person. So I mean, that's really the art of it. The science then comes from how much you can spend on ads, how much you can spend on on getting that message out there, whether it's on pre-rolls for YouTube or little ads that show up, retargeting, whatever it is. You just want to make sure that you have all of that information ready to go.
Right. And kind of understanding that buyer persona in a way and just making sure you understand the person that you're trying to talk to. You've mentioned ads a lot of times throughout this episode. Do you see ads as a better way than just pure content marketing?
So content marketing is kind of it's all about being found,
Uh-huh.
right? So if somebody's looking for content like the five best microphones to buy, right? You
Mhm.
can write a great blog post about it. You can make a good YouTube video about it. So, but all of that is then being found, right?
Right.
Paid ads is actually putting yourself in front of the people at their time of need or based on their demographic choices. So, Google has this great download called the zero moment of truth. And what the zero moment of truth is, it's the you giving the user the exact information that they're looking for in the exact moment that they want it. So
Oh.
what does that mean in practice? If I pick up my phone right now and I type in dog grooming, right?
Mhm.
I'm located in Fort Lauderdale. The fact that there's a dog groomer in LA that ranks number one on Google is of no use to me whatsoever because
Right.
I'm on the other side of the country. Who cares? Right. So Google already figured that out a long time ago to give me the most relevant results
Mhm.
at the exact time that I need it. Now, the other part of this is nobody types in dog grooming for their health. Nobody does it for funsies. Nobody does it for any other reason other than the fact that I need a dog groomer within a 2 mile radius of where I happen to be at this exact moment. That's the zero moment of truth. The flip side of that is when you go into the demographic based platforms like Facebook, right? You're not targeting, no one's going into Facebook and looking for dog grooming, but
Right.
they may be looking for dog groomers, right? So you can then target the types of what pages that they like within a certain geographic area. You can look for them demographically. That's why that platform works really well because you're targeting people that already have an affinity to dogs, and those dogs need to have their hair cut, and I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So you need to find someone who will, right? So if I had to sum this up to answer your question very directly, is that you can create a great blog post, but if no one really sees it, if no one reads it, or if you
Mhm.
create a great video and no one views it, it's not really there. Paid ads, on the other hand, puts it right in front of their face, right there. I mean, you pay for that service,
Right.
right? You pay to get it out there. Now you just need to figure out the cost benefit of doing that.
Cost
So that's why
perspective.
why the ads are so important.
Right. Interesting. I don't know if it's still called this anymore, but this sounds like you're explaining there the Facebook dark post and really kind of niching down that targeting to that specific person.
Right. I mean, and you really should be using these in conjunction. Like, say, for example, you don't have a large budget for paid ads. That's great. Not everybody does. But so if you're gonna invest your time and your energy into creating, let's just say, 10 great dog grooming posts
Hmm.
on for your blog, that's great as well. But then what you should be doing at the bare minimum, I mean, this is the lowest barrier of entry and it's cheap to do so, is to retarget them. So if they read your blog post, then great, then start showing them retargeted ads, which are a fraction of primary searched ads,
Hmm.
to bring them back to your site or bring them back to your service, right? All
Right.
that can be done for like for $1 to $10 a day. It's really not that, and you decide. You could also, like, okay, I don't have $300 a month to spend on it. Then limit it to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Hmm.
Limit it to only Tuesdays, or whenever it is.
Whatever
The
you can do.
data is the data is there for you, right? You could just look at your Google Analytics and see who's rating it and from where, and then make that decision. Then don't make the decision based on the hairs on the back of your neck,
Hmm.
or some salesman told you to do so. The
Right.
information's there and it's in plain English, so might as well use it.
Yeah, and like you said earlier too, looking up stuff on Google, you could often find quite a many things on there if you need to find something new kind of skill. One thing you really kind of inspired a thought of is like if someone looked at someone that they like and you can just retarget that person for that specific item, what if you were to like, there's a lot of apps and plugins for websites to watch what people do. Like, hey, they checked out this blog post, they read it all, they were on there for a long time. Let's show them another one, the same kind of thing. You could use Zapier to connect your website to MiniChat and then send them another blog post of a similar type, or even maybe an upsell, that kind of thing through that messenger platform. Like you said, we need to be on it considering how it's a good opportunity at this point. No one else is really that active on chat bots. So it's interesting.
So chatbots is one thing. Like ActiveCampaign has this. You can send messages like, "Hey Jeff, I see you're checking out my dog grooming post."
Hmm.
So they're watching you throughout the site experience. Or you can set up triggers that if they signed up for your newsletter and then they go and visit your bio page 3 times, that's a trigger I want to receive, because if this person looked at my bio page 3 times,
They're looking at you.
he's probably itching for a phone call,
Yeah.
right? So it behooves you to move forward and make that contact.
So kind of pivoting a little bit, what kind of tools do you like to use for social media or repurposing or omnichannel, whatever, digital marketing?
It starts with planning. So I use teamwork.com
Hmm.
for project management, and and that's really the central hub of everything for me. Especially with the people that I work with, it doesn't matter whether they're across the street or halfway around the world. They're remote to me, right? I don't the I don't have the opportunity to meet with them over coffee or at the water cooler, or wherever else it is. So I I tend to make sure that everyone is working on the same types of tasks, that they know exactly what's expected of them, how to respond to tasks that I assign, etc. And the whole thing is there, like my team knows days, if not weeks in advance, like what's expected of them, right? So if we have to write blog posts for next month, it's already up on that's already posted. What I do there is really just try to create an open enough culture. After that, I've standardized on Google Drive because Dropbox was it was way too slow for me, right? And then it really just comes down to the different types of social media posting tools. The ones out there like Hootsuite and Buffer, but they can get expensive depending on your needs, or they can be free if you go with their free platforms. It really just depends on what's the best for you, for your process. You really just need to make sure that you have the process set up so
Hmm.
that you can go and be able to hire well as well. You want to make sure that once you bring someone on, it doesn't take you 3 months to train them on what it is that you're working on. You want them to there should be a clean standard operating procedure. How do we do this? How do this is the Jeff Effectivo.Social way of posting content.
Yeah.
There should also be accountability, right? So we even build in the accountability into the tasks. Did you go back and check on that post to see if it actually posted correctly? Is it
Mhm.
even there, right? Or did
Right.
it use the right picture? It's all got to be pre-programmed out. And it's not so much being a nanny, it's just being
Thorough.
just being thorough.
Yeah.
I'd want my clients to enjoy the fact that I'm on top of their social channels as I'm programming them.
When you're very prepared, and that organizational aspect will alleviate any kind of stress or worries, because like you said, you want to have that open culture, but when you're remote like that, you can't meet someone over face to face over a coffee. You can't ask them how they're doing if you see that they're stressed out one day at work. You have to have that openness so people can feel open enough to tell you like, hey, I'm having a really terrible day today. Can I get some kind of extension or some kind of just problem solving mechanism? And by having that corporate structure almost in a way, or more, not that's not the right way to say it, but having that more just organizational structure, making sure like, hey, these are the processes we use. We use these in this way to really make sure that actually executes properly. I really like that whole backtracking, make sure it posts correctly too. And it's interesting how you just prepare so well.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a work in progress.
Hmm.
Have I mastered it? No. But then again, it comes down to, it comes down also to the people that you hire. I
Yeah.
mean, if they're just not that thorough or they just don't throw punctuation in, where it's supposed to be, then there's no amount of nanny tasks that I can put in to correct it. I mean, you really do need to come with a certain degree of competence and
Yeah.
ownership. And if you lack those two, I'm sorry, I have no use for you.
Well, and I getting these like leadership characteristics vibes from you. So I think that by being that kind of stern, like you have to have those characteristics to be successful and to be thorough. If you don't have that, then you're just not in the right field or right job.
Exactly, but I think if I had to break this down even simpler,
Hmm.
if I'm hiring you as a writer, to write blog posts, I mean, the minimum barrier of entry would be, correct spelling.
Yeah.
Correct spelling, adequate grammar. Um, Maybe you don't know the vernacular of, how Spanglish is spoken here in South Florida.
Clever.
Those are forgivable things, right?
Hmm.
But, it's like, but I'm not a fifth grade teacher, right? And if I have that fear that I have to go back in and check your spelling and check your grammar and things like that, from a writer,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, what are we doing here?
Yeah, definitely. And so one thing I kind of being like is more of a futurist mindset. It's always kind of how I've been. One thing I'm curious about, where do you see Effectivo.Social really progressing in the future?
Dominating the world in 5 years.
Dominating the world. Remind me to share you my Take Over the World playlist.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. We'll do that. I saw a funny meme yesterday.
Uh-huh.
Um, if so, 5 years ago, if someone would have asked you where everyone got that wrong. If they were asked 5 years ago, where would they be in 5 years?
Mhm.
Everyone got that wrong. Now.
Yeah.
So I think what's really interesting is I don't know if Effectivo.Social is going to be around or this great or this great success or whatever it is. I mean, I know that from my career, I must have reinvented myself 4, maybe 5 times already.
Hmm.
And at some point, social, just the social part is going to evolve, and Effectivo.Social may or may not be, like like a leader in that space. And if it doesn't, then move on to something else, but just make
Yeah.
sure that you're delivering value to your clients. That's really the most important. So if that means that I have to pivot again,
Hmm.
then let's pivot.
Definitely. And I resonate with you on that whole having to reevaluate yourself, rechange your whole dynamic. Because a few years ago, I guess almost half a decade ago at this point, I had a brand before PolyInnovator. That's what we're on now. And I wanted to do basically the same thing, but I had it more as a company kind of brand. But in order to really have that to be successful, there needed to be a face of it. Me, I guess, or someone else on a team that I could build, and it wasn't going to build the way it was going to be. It wasn't going to be working at that time. And so I was like, okay, I need to pivot. Someone told me like, hey, this is really cool, but you really need a personal brand. And I kind of fought it at first. Like, I don't really want a personal brand. I want to create content, but I don't really want to be associated with me per se. And then I like, okay, I finally clicked. I was like, oh, let's build this brand. Let's build it out. And all of a sudden now Polyinnovators years later is doing kind of what you're saying. You don't know where you can be in 5 years. I didn't know I was going to be doing interviews like this in 5 years ago. Okay.
It's interesting that you bring up that whole personal branding thing.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, during doing the jeffmendelson.com site and building the One Big Tip podcast, for me was one of the hardest projects I've worked on in my entire career,
Yeah.
because I had always been enamored with this idea, like, back when it was cheap to get an 800 number.
Mm-hmm.
Remember those? Right.
Yeah.
When we used to have long distance. So I would, I would literally tell people, well, you don't see the army of people behind me. When there were some times that I had 20, 30 people working for me, there were other times it shrunk to like 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I always wanted it to be something larger than just Jeff.
Yeah.
Right. But then what happened was I found myself telling everyone, your name is Dustin Miller, your name is Jeff Mendelson, go with that, just
Mhm.
be yourself. Everyone else is taken. Right. And, because creating a brand, that's hard enough.
Yeah.
Right. But you already are your brand. So that's already 80% completed. It's a very hard project. I'm not sugarcoating this at all.
Yeah.
It was hella tough in order to get it off the ground. But I think once I got over myself, once I got over it, it's like, okay, I can deal with this now. Now with the jeffmendelson.com site and the one big tip, it's like, I found my legs with it. And it's something like, okay, now I can move on to the next step. But it is very hard. Like, don't discount, don't stress the fact that, this should be the easiest project. I mean, no, it's the hardest
Yeah.
project you're going to work on.
Well, as much as people like hearing their own name, they like hearing like people say stuff about them. It's human nature to like just literally hearing our own name out loud. Like when you said my name, there's a little sparks that fire in the neurons. Like, oh, someone said my name, awesome. But when you're like making a podcast or a video and you hear your own voice or you see yourself on camera for the first time,
Oh
it's
my
just
God, it's the hardest thing.
yeah. It took me months, almost a year, to really start making YouTube videos. I started making podcasts before YouTube videos because I could somewhat get past that voice thing, mainly because of karaoke. I already got used to it through that. But and even that's all muffled with all the sound. And so like hearing my voice on my podcast, I literally went to one of my old episodes the other day and it shook me to my core. I was like, man, I sounded so much different then. It was only, 4 years ago? Yeah.
You know what it is that everyone starts with 0 followers.
Hmm.
And not that I'm inviting you to do it, like, please don't. Go to my first episode 1 of my podcast, because I do sound a lot different than I do today.
Yeah.
And that's only in the space that, like 4 months ago. And, yeah, it's a
You learn a
thing.
lot.
You learn a lot.
Yeah.
You learn a
Well,
lot. It's also the equipment, it's
yeah.
the environment I'm in, the format that I want to be, the persona I want to put out there. It's a whole process.
Well, we were talking about microphones before this, and my first microphone, condenser mic, picked up everything. So the echoes in my room were always really annoying. I think the echoes combined with it being a crappy mic is what caused it to spike so much and clip. Because I would look at my recordings and it would just clip constantly, even if I didn't speak too loud. And it was frustrating. So when I upgraded this mic, there's already a better quality there. The sound dampening, much better. And it's just one of those things, like small changes like that, the incremental changes that you make over time are part of the reason why you sound different, but you also kind of learn to change your tonality, breathe in more, speak from the guts, that kind of thing.
I think part of it, well, as guys, we're all gearheads, right?
Yeah.
So, I felt like I needed the good mic. I needed the boom arm. And I was telling you, the mic that I'm using right now, I actually bought 7 years ago. It's a
Mhm.
Rode Podcaster mic, and it sat in a box for so long. And when I was trying to figure out all the, how I was going to redo the podcast, I went to Best Buy and I bought all the mics. Right, I just bought them all and I
Mhm.
connected them up one by one and just tried my voice, and I hated them all. And then I dug this thing out of the box. I'm like, oh my God, I sound great.
Well,
So it just took me a while to find it.
yeah. Well, and like more practice makes perfect, so to speak. What's your favorite part about content marketing? Like when I say content marketing, I mean more like content creation. So blog posts or podcasts. Like, what's your favorite?
Podcasting, I always knew it was a great networking tool, but until I actually did it,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God,
Yeah.
like far and away, I am speaking to so many interesting people. I am, most of these people I never would have met otherwise, even if I would be, going to conferences and everything. I just, as an introvert, I just don't go and shake hands with everybody.
Yeah.
At these places, if someone comes up to me, I can hold a conversation, but me going out and trying to talk to them, it would just be really hard. But on my podcast, I have their undivided attention for 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it, and it's great. And even if nothing comes out of that relationship, at least they know my name.
Yeah.
At least we've been in contact once. I have my foot in the door if I do need to reach out to them again. And then the same thing for me. I close out every single podcast like on the post call.
Mm.
If there's anything I can help you with, I love paying it forward. I love talking about this stuff. Please feel free to pick up the phone and call me.
I love that. It's very personal and very kind of you to really offer that too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just that, and you know where that comes from is that getting a little spiritual here. It's good karma, right? Now, keep in mind, as a digital marketer, I hear a lot of dumb ideas. I'm like Shark Tank dumb ideas, right? Where people are coming up to you, like there was this one time, I swear to God, three times in 3 months, I had three different people come up to me and like, hey, I want to create this app. Really, what kind of app? Well, we want to take pictures and put filters on it, and it's going to be social.
Oh, so Instagram.
And I'm like, hey, buddy, it's called Instagram. Oh no, mine's going to be interactive, right? And then I realized this guy has no idea what he's talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, listen, I still give people like that my time. Like I'll spend a half an hour, 45 minutes on the phone with them, not just to serve at the pleasure of me ripping their idea to
Reading the
shreds,
threads.
but also to hopefully get them to not spend their money somewhere else, because I could just as easily turn that question around and say like, yeah, we can build an app for you. Yeah, $5,000. Yeah, we can do it. I can get some guy in India to put something together. I mean, he's going to run into server storage issues very
Yeah.
quickly, right? But I could have done that, but I don't want my name associated with crap like that.
Yeah.
So I literally talked myself out of a job, right, as opposed to trying to be the guy to take every job. And it's a much cleaner experience,
Yeah.
right? It's a much cleaner, I feel good about myself. And what I found was, doesn't happen with everybody, but people remember who was good to them,
Yeah.
right? So I'll get a call 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, hey Jeff, remember you talked to me about this idea? You're like, okay, yeah, that was a dumb idea, but now I'm doing this. Like, now I'm a real estate agent, and now I need to do X, Y, and Z. Let's talk.
Yeah.
It's good karma.
It's putting that foot in the door even back then and allowing them to see you for who you are as a good person, and then they'll remember you down the line.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
Again, some Gary Vee vibes right there, I tell you. Personalities, I think, make a big play as well. One term that I saw, I don't remember exactly particular, I think they're on the website, but what is creator in chief?
Creator in chief. I think anyone can be a CEO, executive director.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just the one that makes it happen.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I heard this one CEO just call himself overhead.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's really what he is, because he's the one with the biggest salary, who directs all the other people to do the actual work. He's just overhead.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think that I am not the overhead, that I'm that I'm pushing together the strategy. I mean, this is my business. This is Jeff's way of doing things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it may not be the best, it may not be the right one for your business, but it is my way of doing things. So that's why I'm the creator in chief.
I love it, actually. And one thing that made me remind me of is actually one of my guests the other day, Sean Shepard, one of the founders of GrowthX. He was talking about, in an interview that I was watching during my research phase, is entrepreneurs love that crave of change. They want to create, they want to innovate. That's just kind of how you and I and like people like us are. We want to create stuff. And once you start kind of building that startup or that business to a certain point, you start to lose some of that creative and starting to have to replace it with the overhead, that operations aspect. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs who lose kind of their drive because of that. So I like the creative in chief because it kind of counteracts that.
It does counteract that a little bit, but at the end of the day, when you're building a business, if you're doing it yourself, then you are a freelancer. You're wearing all hats.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do the accounting, you have to do the programming, you have to do, all that stuff.
Yeah.
When you start branching out, then you got to learn the better skills, like delegating.
Mm-hmm.
Thing, HR.
Yeah.
You got to keep people happy.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did, for example, was I made it my point, to the extent that I could, to meet my contractors in person.
Oh.
And there was a time that I was traveling a lot. I came out of divorce. I didn't have my kids full time. So I would go through these big swaths of time that I didn't have any parental responsibility. So I would go to Europe for a month.
Yeah.
I'd go to Southeast Asia or whatever. And if that's where they were, hey, let's meet up for coffee. Let's meet up for dinner. And what happens is, now you're not a postage sized image on your screen. It's a living, breathing person.
Yeah.
And it creates, these people just don't leave you because they know who you are as a person.
Yeah, well, and it makes that much more personal connection, and they'll be much more motivated to actually work for you, and more specifically with you over these years and time to really create this together.
That's exactly it.
Mm-hmm. Like, what's the weak points of having this kind of remote work team?
Not everyone is a good delegator.
Okay.
Not everyone wants to work from home. Um, it, it, when I'm interviewing someone, I'm looking not only for the hard skills, like can you do the actual job, where are you in life, right?
Mhm.
So, as an employer in the United States, you can't ask questions like, are you married? Like what's your, like what holidays are you going to take off?
Right.
For example, but, on a contractor basis, or you can infer it based on the, which country you're hiring in, you can kind of infer, what kind of person you're talking to and, what their religious beliefs are. And that's fine. Like as long
Mhm.
as as far as I'm concerned, as long as you can do the job, it's great. But if I'm working with a content writer who has a family that is 7 hours ahead of me, working somewhere in Eastern Europe, I need to be cognizant of the fact that if I want to speak with her at 2 in the afternoon my time, she's exhausted,
Yeah.
right? She already put the kids to bed. She's not going to be in a frame of mind to talk business with me,
Yeah.
right? So I need to adjust. I need to adjust that way. And what happens is when I'm hiring for specific positions, I kind of need to know, some of this meta information so that I am not bothering them on their holidays or on their family times and things like that. I really don't want to. I don't want to
Mhm.
be that. I don't want to be that guy that's texting them at all hours of the night. I certainly don't want to receive a text message at 2 in the morning
Yeah.
saying, "Hey," asking me a question, even if I hear it or not. I just don't want to deal with it. So, but I think also, me going through that extra couple steps makes me a better person to work with, because once I know what your routine is, then I can be sure not to bother you on those off hours.
Not to interrupt and whatnot. And it seems like you took a really holistic view of it. And like you said, not everyone wants to work from home. Or do you see like this pandemic? I mean, during this recording, we have the pandemic still going on, and I'm sure it's going to still probably hit around for a while too. Where do you see that kind of coming into play with something like this?
I think all right. So first of all, a couple of things.
Hmm.
There are an explosion of these alternative work sites that have come up. Like WeWork,
Hmm.
Spaces are the two big ones, and then each city now has 10 to 20 different brands of co-working spaces and places that you can go. The fact of the matter is not everyone can work from home.
Hmm.
Right now my kids are teenagers, so it's not a big deal. They don't want to be with me. They don't need me, right? Someone who's got 2, 3, 4 small kids at home,
Yeah.
I don't want to be them, right? they they need to get away. So I've worked in those co-working spaces a lot. I subscribe to two of them,
Hmm.
and it's important for me to find that place where I can get into my flow, put on my headphones, and just work until someone tells me to go home.
Yeah.
What I think is going to happen is, first of all, the people that I'm already working with are already used to this whole working from home, don't have an office type thing. I'd be surprised if I got a freelancer that got their own office,
Yeah.
for that matter. What I think is going to happen is more companies are going to be open to the fact of smaller service-based providers like myself, like whoever, to provide those types of services, simply because it is cheaper to do so if you don't have to invest desk space, buy them a laptop, pay all their benefits and all that. Once you factor in all those costs, paying a service provider like myself is half the price of
Yeah.
what it costs to bring in a full-time, marketing person at $40,000 a year. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't, like I don't get the math. So I think, to answer your question more directly, I think that there's going to be more of it. A lot of these, let's call them old school companies,
Hmm.
are now coming to terms with the fact that, yeah, the business has worked and existed for 6 months while we were through this pandemic with everyone at home. Why do we need all of the employees,
Yeah.
back in the office? And once you have the employees working at home, well, I think the next step is, why do they even need to be employees?
Yeah.
So, the gig work and service work, and all this is here to stay, and it's good. It's going to be an interesting fallout. I follow that kind of news very closely.
Yeah, definitely. My particular kind of phase of my content right now has been about self-education and just education as a whole. And it makes me think about business and schools and how this pandemic has really brought everyone on Zoom and just these digital connections, and how there's going to be this massive change, I think, in the next coming years. Even if nothing really, like, these companies don't change, the mindset behind it will. And there's a lot of people who don't understand their own kind of mindset when they're working. Like, there's a certain aspect of, hey, like, hey, I'm here to work, I want to work right now. But if you have kids in the background, you obviously can't. But some people actually work better from home because they're able to go get their snacks when they need to. They need to go, if they need to go to the bathroom, they don't need to ask for permission for jobs that require that. And so their actual efficiency is probably going to be increased. And so, like, you, like the companies are saying, like you were saying, why do we need to have them in, here in the first place?
Exactly. I think what's gonna happen in the end is we are gonna see more people working from home, but we're also gonna have, some people are gonna be coming back. I would love to see more people working from home. I think it just makes more sense.
Yeah.
Even the 15 minutes, 15 minutes each way, a half an hour, then you add on traffic, another 45 minutes. I mean, losing an hour a day, God, that is lost productivity.
Yeah.
That is so lost. And I think once people start to realize, like, wow, I got so much more done during this time, the ones that did take advantage of this downtime in order to make something new
Hmm.
are going to be much better for it in the end.
Definitely. So we met on matchmaker.fm. What brought you to that platform?
So I was looking for platforms to put myself out there as a podcaster, both to get podcast guests
Hmm.
and for me to be a guest on other people's platforms like your own. So there's a couple of them out there. I also joined. There's Podmav, I think, uh, and then there's this other one called
Yeah.
podcastguests.com. And really, what I'm doing there is just I wanted to be a guest more as well because when I have guests on my show, it's me building up my traffic and having them do it. But I also like to talk. It's nice to pass the control on to someone else,
Yeah.
and not be the host. So that's really where it came from.
I I love that, and I really like having people like you who are hosts on the show, because it not only can I pick your brain, like, hey, how can I be a better host, but also just like it makes it a little bit easier to, hey, you know how this is going to be already. I don't necessarily have to prepare you as much or something like that. I like being overly communicating. Like, I gave you like the questions like multiple times, I feel like, but I wanted to make sure that you felt comfortable on the show, that kind of thing. And I love how that's what you were trying
Very
to go
comfortable.
for.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I love just well, like I said, I love talking about this. I can talk about this all day. So
Uh, my second guest on the show, James Mulvaney, I think that's the third episode. He is the CEO of podcast.co and radio.co, and who are the ones that made matchmaker.fm. And so we
mhm.
were talking about the platforms and that kind of thing. And it was interesting having that dynamic of having that CEO on there. And he actually has a current endeavor to go on 30 podcasts in the next 30 days. I think he's still going too. So you might want to hit him up and have him on your show. But it'd be interesting to see what comes of that, because he's really trying to delve into being a guest on people's show.
That's actually my next my next focus as well. I found it very overwhelming to get all the guests onto my show.
Hmm.
I got so many. I started out as a once a week podcast, and then I
Yeah.
scheduled over 50, and then I realized that there are only 52 weeks in a year.
Yeah.
So I had to change the format there very quickly, and now I'm just knocking them out, so that as quickly as I can. And really, what it's doing is that I'm stacking up content.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing I've actually, like, I was a blogger since 2011, but I was never consistent with it over the years. Like, actually, I think I was more consistent with it when I started than I am nowadays. And it's interesting how by batching it up like this, like you and I both are just getting a whole bunch of guests on and batching it out over time. I switched from doing like a quick launch. I was just releasing the episodes as soon as I finished editing, basically. And I found myself really quickly kind of getting a little bit burned out from that, because I love these guests, but I wanted to make sure that the quality of the podcasts were perfect, or as perfect as I can get. I was like, oh, this is going to be really crazy when I get a whole bunch of guests in one sitting.
It comes down to planning,
Yeah.
right? It comes down to, and also if you're going to do these really long, these longer, interview type things, that's great. One of the things that I wanted for my podcast was for it to be shorter. So my podcasts are just 10, maximum 15 minutes long. Ideally, I'd like them to be even shorter, but I don't want to rush people. If they have something interesting to say, I want them to have the time to do it. But I want to focus on one thing. That's why it's called the one big tip.
Yeah.
What's that one thing that that you would give? And it's not so much the what. It's not the what is your one big tip, but the how.
Yeah.
At the end of the interview, at the end of the episode, I want the listeners to have a I learned something vibe,
Right.
right? Like a ding,
Like a
something
call
like
to
that. I
action
want them to
almost.
learn one. I want them to learn one thing about it. And if I can light a fire for one person off of one interview,
Mhm.
then I've done my job. Then
Yeah.
I'm fulfilled.
Well, like you said earlier about pulling it back to the karma thing, where you're trying to send out those good vibes to that person and try to help them. What's really ironic is that the person I was talking to earlier today, the other interview I had, his podcast is called One Simple Question, and it's one of those things where he tried to break it down to that one point. We were talking about trees, where if you're in the middle of a forest and you see a whole bunch of trees and a whole bunch at once, and they're just overwhelming, you're not going to really see anything. You're not be able to get anywhere. But if you pick one tree, climb it up, keep climbing, sooner or later you're going to get to the top, and you'll have a much bigger view as to what's going on, and a kind of same mentality as an interview, like, hey, what's the theme that we're going for today? What's the kind of question you really want to dig into? Or what's the one big tip, so to speak?
Yeah, I think there's some great ways to riff off of it. I mean, I'm not gonna, trademark it or claim it as my own, right? It's just I know that the only time I devour a lot of podcasts is when I'm driving like to Orlando with my kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Drive them nuts in the car. Well, then again, they have their own headphones. They don't need me anymore, right? But that's really the only time that I have to, listen to the longer ones. So that's why I was going for the shorter ones, and
Yeah.
it's something that worked out for me. So.
Definitely. I think that your shorter one is a very, I don't want to say niche, because I think there's other people doing some shorter ones out there, but it's a very unique situation there where people are going to want to do it in the short time that they have. And people usually listen to podcasts for just situations like that when they're driving or walking. And so I love that shortness of it. And I think that your
Thank you.
one big tip too is a really unique concept and really focused. That's why I thought you might like the other guy too, Abhishek Lahoti. I think that he might be a good guest on your show, and you might be able to network with him.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna look him up. There was, I think I saw his profile on the Matchmaker. I'm gonna look
Yeah,
him up then.
definitely. Where are you wanting to take this podcast in the future? You said that you have a whole bunch of a backlog of people. Where do you want to take maybe the next season?
I haven't thought that far ahead yet
Mhm.
because when I started this whole rebranding process, this whole personal branding process, I mean, I'm about 2.5 years into it,
Mhm.
and I know that I putzed around for the first year and a half without making anything happen.
Yeah.
And then when I finally like, okay, now I'm going to take action. Now I'm going to actually do it. And then of course I needed all the right gear at the right time and all that. Okay, fine. Right. What I came to the point was I'm not going to have every detail ready. I don't even have a strong lead magnet. I have strong lead magnets for, for my clients and all the stuff that I do. I just didn't do one yet for the one big tip.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that I just wanted done is better than perfect at this point. I wanted to launch. I wanted to get something out there, and I will catch up to that. And I don't think there's any shame. Like I used to beat myself up and know why am I not doing this? I need to have the whole the whole thing A to Z. I'm like, no, you just through B.
Yeah.
Just need to
Well,
get through B. I mean, at the
quality's
end of the
quality.
day, yeah, quality is quality. But at the end of the day, right? I still have my day job, right? I'm still servicing my existing clients,
Mhm.
right? I still have my family that I need to take care of. I still have, I still have my wife that I need to, that I can't exclude. I can't, like I can't do everything, but also there's no, who said that I had to have A through Z already pre-planned out?
Mhm.
I don't subscribe to it. I mean, I'm gonna have content ready and working, and if I'm gonna create a course or a mastermind or something else June July ish, then great, then that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it then because it's going to be great when I do it.
Yeah.
And
You're
that's
focusing
my
on
story.
just building it up, I feel like.
I'm focusing on building it up right now because when I tried to stress over every little detail about looking perfect and
Mhm.
sounding perfect and all that, nothing got done.
Yeah.
So.
Oh,
Now something's done.
yeah,
It's,
exactly. Well, and you're batching it up too, so like you don't have to worry about it for a while, but and you can focus on the other things like the lead magnet kind of thing. I definitely understand your mentality on that. I putzed around for the first couple of years of PolyInnovator, despite the fact I was so driven to do it. My actions weren't accompanying that drive, and so I get how you're wanting to get that situation started, and you just have to kind of build it up, get that snowball.
I'm letting it snowball for now. You know, and the other thing, I'm not even, and I know I shouldn't be saying this out loud because it's the antithesis of everything I do for my clients, right?
Hmm.
I haven't even looked at the numbers. I have
Hmm.
no idea how many downloads I've had, and I'm zen with that. You know,
Yeah.
I'm cool. Like I'll figure it out. You know, when the interviews slow down and I have a little bit of time, you know, I'll be able to, you know, throw in a commercial there or throw in a recording, however it is. But you know, now's not the time. Now I just want to get it out.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I'm trying to do with PolyInnovator and this subset, the Polymath Polycast, is just create good content, build traffic, build people's interest. And I think that with people like you on the show, doing these interviews, there's a lot of really interesting topics that people can really get into, and they'll resonate with the brand. Like, hey, there were some things that I've always really delved into polymathy in my life. I love that term, being a polymath, and I learned new things from all the people I've had on the guest, even from you today. And it's interesting just how when you have that change, you could learn something new. It changes what you do, the actions that you take.
You know, just that one sentence that you said could be, you know, could just be like a one or two side topics that you could talk about. What have I learned by doing 50 interviews, or what, you know, what actual advice am I going to take, you know, from X, Y, and Z guests? You
Mhm.
know, all of those, you can repurpose that in some way, shape, or form so that you can create even more content. You know, you're going to need a way to, you know, jot down those ideas, make sure they're not forgotten, repurpose them in some way. Maybe even taking, you know, one big quote out of each interview and creating a small ebook. You know, here are my top 10, you know, zingers for content marketing. You know, there's all kinds of great stuff like that.
I love content repurposing, and I like how you segue to that too. What do you have any specific strategies or tools for repurposing content?
Not yet. I've just in the past couple months fell in love with Canva, and I
Yeah.
didn't realize. So at first, I was like doing all my artwork in Photoshop, and I'm not a Photoshop guy.
Mhm.
I can't draw a stick figure to save my life, but it was really the only tool that I could move things around with layers and all that. And until I actually figured out like, oh, that's how it works. You could just drop the picture into the frame, and then
Yeah.
it automatically makes a circle. I was like, oh my god, because I know that's like 15 steps to do in Photoshop,
Yeah.
and in Canva it's easy, and it's like wow. So things like that have changed, and there's also some great tools. Like you gave me the idea for Repurpose.io.
Yeah.
I just signed up for Headliner
Yeah.
to do the audiogram, so that's another one that can do it. There's another two or three out there that do that, but you know, all of that is a process, and all that somebody needs to put it out there. So like for my podcast, we make a blog post, right?
Hmm.
That blog post should also be on Medium, right?
Yeah.
So Medium only allows you to post up to 3 stories every 24 hours, right? So I'm already 25 episodes in, so that means I have to now, either me or someone from my team needs to go in every day and do the next three, do the next three, do the next three, do the next three. You know, it's a process. And
Yeah.
then to do the videos, you have to upload it, send it over to Headliner, wait the 30 minutes for them to process it, and then take it down and then send it over to YouTube. There's a lot of, you know, there are a lot of little details that go into all this,
Hmm.
and it just depends on how good you are at, you know, making a process out of it, or use it, or paying for the right tool that does it for you. You know, it's all there.
Yeah. I'm a repurposed IIO kind of diehard at this point. Just to make it clear, they do the same thing as Headliner. I think Headliner has slightly better templates in a way, but you can add your own image to repurpose and whatnot. So they do the
Yeah, so
audiograms.
so I took a look at it. I just haven't had a chance to go in and
Yeah.
you know, and really test drive it, but yeah, it looks very interesting, especially the part where it auto posts to, you know, to YouTube and all that. I'm really excited to try that out.
Yeah. And it's interesting too how you mentioned going to Medium. I won't go on a tangent, but I actually left that platform because of the changes they have made. But it's interesting how you're talking about making a blog post, posting it somewhere else.
Sure, yeah, let's hear it.
So what I like to do is I grew up blogging, and so I like to make a blog post. I turn that into a slideshow. I turn that slideshow and record over both with making it into a video. Take that video, take the audio out, make it into a podcast, because usually the form is similar for me. And then I take each one of those and create a social campaign from that. And you can take the micro content from the videos, the video and the podcast, to do audiograms or little video memes and that kind of thing. So by the end of it, you can end up having around 100 posts just from that original blog post.
So how does that look like in practice? So let's say, for example, you take that one blog post,
Mhm.
you create the 10 to 20 different social assets around it. Does that mean you're just blowing up your Twitter feed with posts every 20 minutes with different quotes, or how does that look in practice?
So I delay it over time. So a lot of the social media research I've done over the years talks about most of the content I make is semi-evergreen. So I don't necessarily feel like if I share it over again, it's going to be a nuisance to the audience, because most of the time it's useful stuff. And like I don't do news related things. I did one post on the quarantine, but that was specific to it. But I don't usually react to things. And so usually I create a content and send it out the day of, a day later, a week later, a month later, a year later. So it spreads out over time.
Okay. So basically what so you're batching, right?
Hmm.
You're putting out so now if you were to look at your July and August um social channels, like they'd be pretty full at this point, no? Or at least they would work without you having to put in much effort. Like if you decided to go on a cruise for a week, you
Yeah,
would still be out there and active.
it depends on when you start it too. And like I said before, consistency is a big issue. So at the current point, I haven't necessarily done it a ton of times in a row. So there's not going to be a whole bunch on the backlog. But not
Mhm.
to mention finding the right tool for it. But that's a whole nother story of social media management tools.
Have
Uh,
you looked at the stats of what that does for your traffic? Like how many people come back? Do you use like UTM tagging, on your URLs as they come back to see where the source of that traffic is coming from?
Not quite yet, no.
Okay. That would be the next step, because it's one thing for you to put it out there for vanity's sake,
Mhm.
right? It's another thing to actually look at the metric and say, like, okay, I know that my Facebook posts come back to me at a, 2 out of 10 clip.
Mhm.
And, if that works for you, then it's great, because if it's something that just, that takes you an extra 5 minutes to do across the entire lifespan of that content, and you know that it's bringing incremental traffic back to your site, at least you should have some way to to take action on it, or at least acknowledge that it exists.
Right.
There's
And
this other tool that I'm sorry to interrupt. There's this other tool you may want to think about called Jot URL. And what Jot URL does is that it's like a Bitly, right?
uh,
So that, Bitly, you can just just shorten the URL, but Jot URL lets you do a couple other things in addition to that. So I think Genius Link also does the same thing. You can put your Facebook pixel in there so that it
mhm.
fires when someone clicks on it. You can also count then how many times people are coming from source A, source B, source C, and you can have it do different things as opposed to just being a redirect tool. You can then use it to see all the different channels and how they interact with each other. It's
Yeah.
probably best if you whiteboard the thing before you dive deep into it,
Yeah.
right? But once you do it and you get into the process of, okay, here's the link, I'm going to create 3 or 4 of these encoded links, and I'm going to make sure that they have all this specific tagging on them. Once you have that, then you're going to really paint a very, very good picture
Right.
about what it is that you're doing and how effective it is for you.
I love that. And I've definitely looked into short links in the past, but I haven't necessarily grabbed any UTM tools or short link tools in the recent years. And that's the one thing too, where you're talking about how does it look on the audience viewpoint. I definitely never want to spam my audience or something like that. So I want to make sure that there's a certain accountability aspect, like not too many posts in one day and that sort of thing.
Right. So, Twitter, you can, because, tweets have a half life of about what, 7 minutes,
Mhm.
but if you're going to do that on your personal Facebook page, if you're just going to be putting out those pictures, yeah, it'll be a little much.
I'm definitely not doing a whole bunch of like pictures all the time too. There's a lot of micro content, not all of that. So yeah. But yeah, thanks
Mhm.
for your opinion on that. What would be the call to action for the audience today?
Call to action to for the audience would be, please look up the One Big Tip
Hmm.
wherever you get your podcasts. Listen to a few episodes. If you like it, please give it a 5-star review and leave a review. That'll really help me out.
Mhm.
And if there's, again, it's all about paying it forward. So you can reach me at jeffmendelson.com. Yeah, there's a contact form there, and I love just talking about this stuff all the time. So if there's anything I can do to help, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and he's been a great guest today, and I hope that you guys have the ability to reach out to him. I'll put all the social links in the description, and I love nerding out with you about it too. We had those like this, they're bouncing off each other, like, oh, we like this, oh, like we like this. So yeah, thank you for coming on today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.